Relax, grab a beer, take that marital aid out of your ear. It's transfer deadline day on the Blue Monday podcast. Hello and welcome to the Blue Monday podcast discussing Ipswich Town up or down since 2015. Available live this evening on YouTube, Facebook, and after the event on YouTube and wherever you grab your podcasts. My name is Craig Finber and I'm your host for this evening's festivities. And joining me are two gentlemen, one of whom is probably a little bit more recognisable to yourselves. Joe Le Taxi, comment allez-vous? Ça va? Où est la piscine?
Yeah, it's been a long day for me. I've been driving back from Paris today, and I think I've been in the car for 9 hours today. I got in about 40 minutes ago, ready to come and give the listeners what they want with all this exciting transfer deadline day news.
With your cravat jaune. You didn't wear your cravat jaune this evening, though.
No. I might have had a croque monsieur, but that was about it.
Perfect. And joining us for the very first time is a gentleman whose name you may have heard because he's been referenced by Ben and Rich, I think, Jacob. This is Jacob Powley, whose words you may have heard, as I say, as Rich and Ben discussed potential signings, defender signings and attacking signings throughout the summer. But Jacob's kindly agreed to join us this evening for a chat about the transfer window. How are you, Jacob? How's it all going? And if you'd just like to let us know who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me on. It's been great to see the response to the videos that I did with Ben and Rich, which is great. It's been quite a good transfer deadline day. I think it's always fun, isn't it? It's doing constantly refreshing Twitter all day and not getting a lot else done. But in terms of a bit about me, so I live down in Cornwall, so not exactly a hotbed of Ipswich Town fans, but there you go. Stuff that I kind of do really, I write a bit about Town and the Championship and the EFL in general over on Substack. But as you've mentioned, done a little bit of work with those transfer target videos as well. And yeah, it's great to be on the podcast.
Perfect. You say it's fun, but there are some people, we won't mention any names, who don't tend to enjoy it as much as others. Speaking of which, before we dive headlong into a hectic day at Portman Road, my lawyers have been in touch and advised me that despite rumours to the contrary, I did not return from Turkey with new teeth and a new, as you can see, a new hairline. I did return from Turkey with a story about a Turkish bath, but me and the man have decided we're neither of us going to talk about that. So yeah, if anybody sees Rich and Seb, just let them know that they may get some sort of summons in the post anytime soon. Speaking of which, Rich, he does go on about not being a huge fan of transfer deadline day, etc., etc. However, he has done this for us, and it's only going to be visible for those of you watching on YouTube. But as you can see, he's done us what I'll call a gold ticker rather than a bright yellow sky one. But he's joined in the fun of it to a certain extent. Right, okay, let's go through some comments. Thank you very much for joining us, everybody. Adi, good evening. Charlie, how are you? Michael, as ever, good morning from Brisbane. We specifically pushed this one back for you, Michael. So on before game day, you're sort of a little bit more aligned to where you need to be. How are you going, Martin? Yeah, well, you say it's exciting. It potentially was going to be exciting. Well, for this particular podcast will be very exciting, but the news that may have come while we're online and on air may not actually now happen. But we'll discuss. The plan is to discuss really what's happened in the Championship, full stop, and then obviously we'll major on what we've been up to ourselves. Good morning. The universe doesn't care. Charlie D, as ever. Hello, Jason. Hello. Spoiler alert. I'll hide that again. Jules, good evening to you. Neil, hi. MW, hi. And an España. That's Spain, for those of you who aren't aware. Okay, so yeah, the reports are that there may not be any more incomings and outcomings this evening as it goes. However, we will discuss potential signings that don't necessarily need to happen today. So as a result, I referenced Rich earlier in his ticker. He's also done this for us. I don't think we're going to get to use that either. So who knows if there is a signing of an out of contract player, fingers crossed it happens during a pre-match live show and Rich can use it there. Right. What I'll do, guys, as I said before, we're going to maybe start off talking about the championship and what's happened with the teams in there. What I put together was a list of up on the screen here, a list of incoming transfer fees, which sort of may help guide a conversation as to why certain clubs have done certain bits of business and other clubs maybe haven't been quite as busy as others. For those of you who can't see the screen, there's a list of all the clubs in the championship and those fees that they've received. And obviously we know about the Parachute clubs that have come down and received a fair chunk of change for their ex-Premier League players, but obviously we've then also got Coventry selling their two big stars and therefore allowing them to do bits and pieces in the transferred market. And it sort of, guys, has skewed things somewhat and probably potentially skewed them away from how we thought that they might end up being this transfer window. Joe, do you think maybe things got a bit rich for us?
Yeah, definitely so. And I think there's also another club, not mentioned in there, but Luton Town, who went up to the Premier League, who, when you look at their recruitment, Mads Anderson, Jacob Brown, all players that you'd have expected maybe to get moves to Parachute Championship clubs, or even to us, a club of our level, have now gone into the Premier League. So effectively, there's another club sort of trying to do business where we were as well. And I say, you look at the fee we paid for George Hurst at the start of the window, sort of 1.5 million, which I think most people felt was about fair. But you wonder what fee that would be now if Leicester were trying to sell him at this point of the window. When you look at, I think the deal fell through in the end, but Southampton had agreed a fee of £8 million for Ross Stewart, who is out of contract this summer and is injured for another month, and he's got 10 championship goals to his name. Joel Perreault was in that sort of 7-8 million range. Tom Cannon going to Leicester from Everton after sort of half a good season, 6.5 million. The money's just gone crazy, and we have been, like I say, you listen to what Mark Ashton was saying at the start of the window, and when he was interviewed over in Austria at the tournament there on Town TV, and I think he's probably overpromised and underdelivered would be my view of this window, and I guess that's probably to do with the fact that they maybe underestimated how the window was going to go. And like I say, we were in for Austin Trusty, and he was 2-3 million, and then all of a sudden he goes to Sheffield United for 5 million. Luke McNally, it sounds like one we missed out on, and now we're sitting here, and we've probably I don't think we're short of bodies in the squad, but maybe short of the quality extra bodies that we wanted.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it, Jacob? As sort of Joe alludes to. Well, I'll ask you two questions. Really, is the initial one asked Joe about here that all of a sudden clubs of maybe a similar size, similar stature, certainly probably fishing in similar ponds to what we would be for these type of players, have all of a sudden got not carte blanche, but all of a sudden they've got a bigger purse and now the wherewithal to go and sign those players and potentially be a bit more attractive by virtue of them being in the Championship for longer than we have been. And then also, as Joe says there about, did we do well to maybe acquire not only Hurst, but also Taylor from Posh when we did? Because ever since, the cost of a Championship player has gone up significantly.
Yeah, I definitely think looking at it from as we are today, those deals definitely look like good value, especially compared to some of these fees that are being quoted now. And I think the previous slide you had up is probably the one that is the best summary of what we're kind of up against, really, because I think what Mark Ashton has said about this player trading, what we aspire to be, is someone like looking at getting these fees in that Bristol City and Coventry have been getting, because that's the only way that you're going to even come close to these parachute clubs in terms of budget. And obviously, because we're having been in League One, I think we're 1 or 2 years behind. We've got a couple of players in our squad who we've bought quite recently who we think maybe next summer might be players who are going to go for that sort of money. But having only been proven in League One, I don't think it would be of good value for us to have sold them now anyway. And obviously we need them on the pitch to adjust to the level up. I think probably another thing that's perhaps trickled down really from the higher clubs in the division is, since we were last in it, I think there's become a much bigger reliance on loan transfers across the board. So you look at the likes of Middlesbrough, Coventry, even Sunderland, the core of their playoff side last year was loans, which means that they're now having to rebuild, which means that and clubs like Coventry, Sunderland, etc., will be more attractive to a player than we will, because we've only just been in the division for a few months. So I think there are lots of different factors which come into play, but I think it's probably just we're maybe a year or two behind where some of these other clubs are. I definitely think we will get there, but at the moment we're just having to make do with what we've got. And like Joe said, I think we maybe haven't got some players who we would come in and think they're definitely going to be starters, which is probably what we were looking for at the start of the window, like we did in League One. Instead of replacing squad players, we would buy a player to start, and our starting player would then become a squad player. But that said, I don't think there's an area that we look at, and I'm sure we'll go into this in more depth later, where I think, oh, we're really short there. I think we've got bodies everywhere. It's just a case of whether we have that quality to push for what our targets are this season.
Yeah, and talking about the and we, as you rightly say, we will go through it later on about squad depth. That's one of the things McKenna said after he signed Williams, wasn't it? Is that he was now confident that he had 2 players for that one position who were of a high quality, and also similar on the right hand side as well. So, and he alluded to the fact he wanted that further on through the squad. But so as you say here, Jacob, in terms of the incoming transfers, what it shows, and I've highlighted them in the bold, is the 3 championship, previously League One clubs haven't sold a player for any money whatsoever. And that's probably, obviously, it then hampers us, Plymouth and Sheffield Wednesday, in terms of our ability to purchase players. You know, our 2 purchases, Hurst and Taylor, along similar lines to Plymouth's 2 signings. You know, they were, albeit Taylor wasn't with us last year, we tried to get him in January and eventually got him. They've only ended up being able to sign 2 players who they already have, and for similar fees to what we've been able to sign our guys for. And
it does seem incredible, though, that us and Plymouth have effectively come up and spent the same amount of money on fees this year, when you'd have expected us to be able to, well, spend a lot more than them, really, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So that's a really, really good point. And but maybe that is down to Jacob's point about us not quite yet being seen as a safe bet in terms of a championship team, and where you'd want to hang your hat for 3 years of a fledgling career, if you see what I mean. But maybe, and it also alludes to Jacob's fact that our players maybe aren't seen as being as attractive quite yet, because they proved it in League One only so far. So clubs further up the chain and further afield, maybe even further afield abroad, aren't yet convinced about the quality of the squad that we've got. So hence why, again, you aren't able to kickstart that player trading cycle off. So yeah, just sort of going on to that, as you can see from the list of players here, and it dovetails in with the amount of money that people have brought in. Coventry spending 15, 16, thick end of 16 million quid on 2 players. Well, 20 million quid if you include the guy from the Dutch leagues. On there, guys, you can see that there's money being spent, and by clubs, as I said before, that you would sort of hope to put us in the same ballpark as. But unfortunately, we just haven't been able to muster the amount of funds that we probably need, and B, then fight them off. Are there any any in there that you'd have particularly taken a fancy to, or any comments on the ones that have already been signed by these guys?
Like, I guess the ones we looked at were Ellis Sims, Jaden Philogene, and then you look at there was talk of Jason Knight. There never really seemed anything in that one, did there? It seemed a bit like we were just using them to pretend we were going to move on from Jack Taylor, and Bristol City were using Jack Taylor to pretend they were moving on from Jason Knight. It seemed in both of our interests to do that, but no, it just, I don't know. It just feels we've been effectively caught out a little bit by what's happened in this league, and we're now in a position where probably we were looking to try and move through the leagues a bit quicker than we are, to now we've sort of been smacked in the face by the realism of what the Championship is now, and that it is going to need to try and get some loans. And even when you're looking at loans, you're not even getting the high end loans in the league, are you? When you look at the free loans we've bought in, you've got sort of Dane Scarlett, who had a sort of mixed, it'd probably be fair to say, loan spell in League One. Amari Hutchinson, who hasn't played any senior football at all other than sort of 30 minutes in sort of Premier League games. And then the third one, Brandon Williams, who's had a good sort of early career at Manchester United, but hasn't done anything for a year or so. So we're in a sort of strange position where we've probably, I think we're looking up, and now it sort of feels a bit like, okay, we're now in that sort of mid-table range, hoping to kick on from there, as opposed to jumping up ahead of the Coventry, well, maybe not Coventry so much, but like the Hulls, the Stokes, the Birminghams, the Bristol Cities, the Millwalls. Those teams would be probably had in our eyesight, but maybe the realization is that we aren't at their level yet.
Yeah, Jacob.
Yeah, I think what's just as interesting really as where those players have gone is where they've come from. I mean, you look at what Coventry have done. Van Ewijk from Heerenveen, Sakamoto from Ostend, is it, from in Denmark? Like, we obviously, again, I think that's just another product of where we've been the last few seasons. We don't have these scouting networks up and running yet. Yeah. And also because I think they've only recently changed the rules, haven't they, about visas and all the rest of it. So again, that's something where I think we maybe weren't as prepared for those changes as other clubs potentially were. But yeah, I think Coventry are probably the standout ones really, because they're probably the model to emulate. They've got, I mean, Hamer and Gyökeres both came in for about $1 million each and sold for, I think, combined 35 million, which has then allowed them to be a little bit more aggressive and go for these sort of £7-8 million players, which otherwise wouldn't have been available to them. Yeah, but yeah, I'd say that's probably the biggest observation, I think, from the window.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting, as Joe alluded to about Ellis Sims. We all got the feeling that he was one that we were in for, and for a price that we could probably achieve. But as it turns out, albeit I think this fee's including add-ons, etc., that's still a good percentage more than we were probably looking to go with in the first instance. I think the one outlier there in terms of clubs which haven't necessarily sold but did still spend would be Millwall. Actually, I think Millwall spent a few quid on fees, but haven't necessarily yet taken any money in. I'll just go through a few of the comments here. People are having their say, and we may come across this once we talk about the Ipswich Town win. Sorry, Joe, your face is being covered every time I put a comment up. Hold on a sec. Let me do that. Oh, that's better. Now we can see your French suntan. LG is commented here. Might be controversial, but Ashton has royally messed up this summer. Clearly missed out on key targets, and now settling for loans and crocked players. Disappointing. Charlie D is saying that Joe's right. He overpromised. Maybe it's a case of saying a little less publicly. And Skip has carried on the conversation. So he doesn't think he's messed up. I think he's refused to get involved in the nonsense fees that we've seen, and that is good for the long-term future of the club. I think there's just going to be this ongoing discussion about, how you sort of view Mark Ashton, and therefore that might push you down the road of how you view the transfer window. What do you reckon, Jacob?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it's fair to say it's been a complete disappointment. I think it's been a sort of satisfactory to good window, not a great one. I think we might be suffering. I think he might be suffering a little bit from the context there, because January is probably the best window we've ever had and possibly will ever have. Like 4 top quality players came in, did the job, 20-match unbeaten run. Like we're not going to get that again. I think the loans comment, I think we're probably about the sweet spot of where I think we should be. As I mentioned earlier, like I think it's a consequence of these bigger clubs sort of hoovering up all these young players at such a young age that loans are pretty much the only way you can recruit really top players if you're not a parachute club, and even the parachute clubs do it as well. So I think three loans is about that sweet spot, adding that extra quality you need without being over reliant like a team like Middlesbrough were last season. But I do sort of see where that comment comes from though, because I think Joe's right that there has been a bit of under delivery based on some of the noises that we had, particularly around the time of that Austria trip. So yeah, I'd say it's probably about a 6 or 7 out of 10, but not a disaster, but maybe not as good as our most optimistic hopes.
I think sometimes we maybe need to look at the end of last season and judge it against what we're expecting to happen in the window from there, because whilst you're sort of, as you go, you sort of change your expectations through the window. I think when we sat here at the end of last season, it was a case of we definitely need another striker. We definitely going to need another centre-back. And then you probably want another versatile attacking player, maybe someone to challenge Wes Burns. We sort of knew Taylor was coming in. We expected Hurst to come in. And really, we haven't really delivered on a centre-back, have we? We've now got, effectively, we're in quite a weak position there, really. When you look at it, you've got Luke Wolfenden and Cameron Burgess who've started the season brilliantly, and you're not going to sort of criticise those two because they've been part of this run where they've played every game through this unbeaten run. But George Edmondson looks a shadow of himself, really, from how he looked under Paul Cook. When I'd probably say, at the point when Paul Cook left, I'd probably say he was probably the best of our signings that we made under him for a fee. Maybe Sam Morsey at that point, but at that point he was looking really, really good. And he just, since he's picked up that bad injury, he just has not looked the same. Whether it's confidence, whether it's injury, whether it's fitness, and this was again the same on Tuesday night, where he's at fault for the second goal, sort of just going down too easily there. And it's just, you're just worried. Elkin Baggett is a player that I think in pre-season there was one game, it's been noted in the Telegram chat, where Stevenage were quite keen on him on loan. When we played Stevenage in a friendly, they just basically spent the whole game targeting him and sort of pressing him, banging the ball onto his head and just getting after him to see how he stood up to that test. And he didn't really impress in that game. It was probably his worst game in the pre-season, and he's looked good since then. But would anyone be that comfortable if we find out that Luke Wolfenden's got a bug tonight and he's not going to play tomorrow, with George Edmondson or Elkin Baggett coming into the side, with, I don't know, Don Ball going there? I don't know. It just seems that we've obviously targeted this position, and it's I don't know. I don't feel comfortable with what we've got in the squad, and that's such a key position. Some areas of the squad are really stacked. You look at sort of central midfield, and you've got Luongo, Morsey, Taylor, Evans, Ball, Humphreys that can all play there. You look in the attacking roles, and you've got 8 or 9 players and playing that 3 behind the striker. But the 2 sort of key parts of the team, centre back and centre forward, you're one injury away from being in a bit of trouble, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree. Those are probably the areas where we're lacking the most depth. I think, obviously, with centre back, a lot will depend on whether Tuanzebe does come in as per the rumours. Yeah, and I think what you said about Hurst is correct as well, because we probably don't. I don't think we've got a player who is a direct kind of replacement style wise for him in the squad at the moment. I know there's been talk about sort of Scarlett having sort of beefed up a little bit over the summer, but I can't see him playing that role. And obviously, it depends what ends up happening with Freddie Ladapo. But yeah, I'd say those are probably the areas where if there is any lack of depth, that's where it is. Yeah, I think tomorrow, obviously, with Tuanzebe not done yet, I do agree that if that situation did come up, I don't think Edmondson is kind of up to it at this point.
But then we did enter the transfer window in May, sort of thinking that centre forward, centre half would be the main areas that would need support and potentially improvement, and they're still the ones that we're talking about on the 1st of September at 9:25, unfortunately.
And it's still not particularly unlikely that tomorrow at 3:00 we have Caden Jackson starting up front for us again, is it? Which, if you'd have said that to anyone, like even last season, Caden Jackson didn't really start any games as a central 9, did he? Other than a couple of the cup games, and now it seems that he started the game against Leeds, and he did really well, and he did scored a good goal in the game in the Stoke game as well. So it's not a criticism of Caden Jackson. I think we all appreciate what he's sort of how much he's grown as a player under McKenna, but I don't think anyone expected him to be starting games as a Championship number 9 for us. And I say it's difficult because I do really like Dane Scarlett, and I think he will be a really good player. I've watched a lot of him for England over the years, and I think he's a really astute signing, and I think he will do well for us. But it's that risk, isn't it, that George Hurst is just head and shoulders above the rest of our strikers in the role that McKenna wants from him, that we haven't really got anyone that could do that. And it's just, you look at someone like maybe a Colby Bishop or something like that. Would he have been a player that you could have bought in? Yeah, maybe you might have had to pay 2.5 million for him, and you might not get that back at the end of the day. But he's a player that can do the role that we need.
Yeah. So just as we were talking about their centre halves, Joe was talking about centre halves. Just before we go on to centre halves, Jacob was giving his own rating of how he thinks we've done in this transfer window. If people want to give us their own ratings of how they think we've done in the transfer window, but please put your workings, otherwise we won't accept your answer. And also, Ben would love this. Who has won the transfer window? He loves to know which team in the Championship has won the transfer window.
And also with Jacob's videos that he did, obviously Dane Scarlett was one of the striker targets, and we had the centre back targets as well. Do you just want to go through those, maybe for anyone who hasn't seen the videos, to see where they ended up, whether they were realistic or not?
Yeah, of course. Put me on the spot now. I have to remember all of them on the top of my head, which I think I should be able to do. So with the strikers, Colby Bishop was one of the players on there. So I don't think there's any moves with him. I think he's still at Portsmouth, isn't he? Another player that I put on there was Will Asula, who's at Sheffield United. So he had it's been a bit of he's kind of had a bit of a strange summer because he had a loan at Derby last year, which is a little bit mixed. I think he ended up going back in January. I think we had a link to him, didn't we, before we bought Hadmay this time last year. But he started the first 3 games for Sheffield United in the Premier League, but that's just due to their lack of injuries. And I just think he's got, even though his goal record isn't great, he'd have been a nice addition if he'd had become available. Just because I think his physical attributes are quite good, probably more in the Hurst mould really than Scarlett. Corley Woodrow again was another one. Not sure I've heard anything about him. I think that was probably been dependent on Luton getting a striker.
He's on the bench tonight, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that. Yeah, I think he's been on the bench the first few Premier League games. So yeah, I think that's all the strikers, isn't it? In centre backs, so on that list we had Thomas Callas, who ended up going to Schalke, I believe, in Germany. So he was right-sided, but most of the ones that on the list were left-sided because obviously that's kind of where we were looking. Cashin was one, and that was, I think, as soon as we'd released the video, I think it came out a day later that Brighton had that £3.5 million bid rejected. So that's probably why that's one that didn't happen. Who else? Liam Kitching at Barnsley. I think there were some really big bids that went in for him from Coventry.
I think he might have gone today, hadn't he?
Has he gone?
I think it's gone up to about 5 million for him.
That's just another example, isn't it, of these
League One player?
Yeah, like we've given the examples of the strikers we were in for and the fees, but when you look at Austin Trusty going for 5 million, Liam Kitchen, I think potentially going for 5 million today as well. Noted that a deal's been agreed for him, but I think that is 5 for him, which is a player with sort of limited Championship experience, isn't there? Sort of one season in the Championship, and like Mads Anderson was seen as the star of the two, and he's gone to Luton for sort of 2 or 3 million, and Liam Kitchen's gone for 5 million. But incredible, really.
Another one on that list as well was Ben Davis, and I don't think I've heard anything about him. I think he would have been more on the kind of expensive end of the spectrum. So he's been at Rangers, been left out of their Champions League squad, and I don't think is in the manager's plans there. Obviously had spell, was a really good player at Preston, had spell I think at Sheffield United as well. I thought he'd have fit the profile of the sort of relatively experienced left centre back. I think 27 or 28 years old he is, so probably probably a good age with experience. I think was captain previously, so would have probably fitted that leader role. But I don't think he's gone anywhere. I don't think there's anything about that. I mean, whether that's that's just something that's a kind of fit I made really, rather than based on any rumours. But yeah, I don't think I've heard anything about him either. I haven't got switched up at the moment. So
in terms of centre halves, then the one that came out this evening, as the name's been released on Twitter, Alex Tuanzebe. Go on, I'll have that one.
Axel.
Although, for those of you who are subscribed to Telegram, that name was mentioned on there by one of the other two gentlemen on your screen at the moment before it was released on Twitter. So, again, not that you need any encouragement to join Telegram and the fantastic community we've got there, but there are sometimes some exclusives that are broken on there. Jacob, what do you know about this guy? And do you think that he could potentially be an answer? And also, what would be the what would be prohibitive about his signing? I don't think he's been ever. He hasn't got a Matt Holland-esque availability record, has he?
No, that is his issue, isn't it? He just has not played a lot of football. He's 25 years old and he's played very, very little football. I think his main sort of season where he was brilliant was effectively for Aston Villa in the year when they got promoted out of the Championship with sort of Tyrone Mings and Jack Grealish and John McGinn, and where they Tammy Abraham, where they had this sort of incredible Championship squad. Him and Tyrone Mings at the back were excellent. And I think he then went to them on loan again the following season in the Premier League and didn't play many games there. 2 years ago, he was on loan at Napoli, played sort of 10 minutes of football in the whole season. Last year was on loan at Stoke, played 4 games. I don't think he's played sort of 50, 60 games in his career, and he's sort of 25 years old. And he is a player that McKenna's worked with. But if we do sign him on loan, how long is he going to take to sort of be? They're talking about a trial now. It's been noted on TWTD and EADT that he's going to be joining us on trial with a view to a deal. So it doesn't really leave us in a great position with him, does it? And
but then what?
You got the caliber, but he's not 21, 22 as he's 25. But if he comes in and he is fit and he plays, you get him on a decent contract, you could probably have a 7, 8, 9, 10 million pound player on your hands, because he has been brilliant in the past. So,
but then the devil on this shoulder over here is saying, well, why are we getting a guy on trial on the very last day of the transfer deadline when he has potentially, I would assume, been available for the previous 2 or 3 months to have on trial and get up to speed and run the rule over?
Well, I think he's been on trial at Luton, hasn't he? And that deal's fallen through for whatever reason. So I guess that shows you the sort of level of player he's at, or could be at, and is seen to be at. But it also shows that there's a reason why they're not willing to take a risk on him. And do you want to be the club that takes risks on players? Are we in a position where we need to be the club that does that? Who knows?
Jacob?
Yeah, I think it's very much low floor, high ceiling with him, isn't it? Because we know that we saw, obviously, it's a few years ago now with that Aston Villa side and his history at Manchester United, that there's definitely a player in there. It's just whether, what's more representative. Is it his potential, or what's happened over the last couple of seasons? I think he's one of those players. I mean, we see it at big clubs, don't we, where they'll get signed up to sort of 4 or 5 year contract around 20 years old. Just as the bigger club wants to protect their asset, they end up on kind of big money, which means that they don't get a permanent move anywhere. They just get in a succession of loans and don't really make a home for themselves. So I guess if you're wanting to be positive, that's probably, maybe he's a type of player. I mean, George Hurst talked about it, didn't he, when he signed, that having a permanent home was really something that was really important to him. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I think high ceiling, low floor is probably the best summary of it, I think. But as Joe said, he's probably not going to be up to speed for a few weeks at the very least. Yeah, and we see with a lot of McKenna signings that they take a while anyway, even the ones that come in when they're fit. So it might be, we might be sitting here in a couple of months' time and wondering how on earth we got him for free, because he's brilliant. But I think there's definitely jury's still out. But I mean, based on what some of the talks, some of the sort of worries that we weren't going to get anybody. At least we have got another body in that area now.
And I suppose if you're delayed going to the game tomorrow because there's a big lorry full of cotton wool and bubble wrap, it's on its way to Portman Road for the one striker we've got and the two half decent centre halves. So yeah, just going on to what we've now got in the building, Seb, ready to train on the grass, Seb. This is what we've got in terms of our squad. This is what it is. Pending any free transfers or out of contract player registrations going forward. I think you guys said, well, we spoke previously that before the pod, is that you think they can be registered up to October, people who aren't currently registered?
Yeah, we will have to leave a space in the squad, which means effectively Nick Hayes won't be registered with the club. He'll be left as a sort of 26th man, but that doesn't really make a huge amount of difference, to be fair. So there, yeah. So we've got 24 in the squad, so we have room for one free agent. So I don't think, like I say, Axel Tuanzebe is the player that looks like it will be at the moment. It's coming on trial, but I guess there's other people out there like Craig Cathcart, who I don't think has signed for anyone yet. So it may be that we pick someone up. It may be that something happens that increases the need for us to sort someone.
Yeah. Just going through some of the comments about how people think we're doing. It's quite interesting, actually, in terms of the ratings that people are giving it and the reasons behind it. Josh here is saying he's giving it a 4 out of 10. Good squad additions, but not to improve. The first 11 is poor in his opinion. I suppose, yeah, the team that's been playing the majority, or certainly starting the majority of our league games, is pretty much the team that played the majority of the final couple of months of last season in terms of starters. So you can see that. Mark says that he's giving it a 6.5 as we're going with now. Mark, 6.5 out of 10. It's been okay. Haven't lost any goals. Our best players have stayed. He'd have kept Edwards. Players that potentially improve us have come in. I suppose that's the thing, isn't it, Jacob? It's and sort of as you were speaking about before, you're signing potential and hope, and Williams and Scarlett could be great. They could be, and I think in terms of previous experience and careers, you'd probably, albeit he's had a bit of a rocky start, Williams has probably got more experience under his belt. Well, he definitely has got more experience under his belt at a higher level than Scarlett, but. That's the thing, though, isn't it, Jacob? It's potential rather than as much as you can have a guarantee for these guys that have come in recently.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty fair summary. I'd say that the only player you'd probably look at and think if they're fully fit, if they're up and running, will definitely get a place in the starting 11 is Williams. I mean, I don't think it will be on the left. I think it might be elsewhere. But again, that's, we've got three sort of good quality fullback options plus another couple there. But yeah, I do agree that we don't have. We maybe haven't signed that sort of first team quality that we were looking at. I mean, we had a couple of names linked at the start of the window, like Raksaki, and obviously that kind of fell through, and then half the league were interested. And I still don't think he's gone anywhere, has he? Is that no. Correct? No,
I believe so. No.
So I think maybe we were hanging our hat on these types of additions, and but yeah, I mean, so one of these loan players might kind of stake a claim. I think we probably will have to be relying on that if we are going to maybe sort of continue how we've started. But yeah, I think I can see all the kind of potential opinions really with these transfer window ratings, really, because you can look at it from the perspective of improving the squad, or whether you think maybe it was quite a tough task and we maybe had overly high expectations. I can see both opinions there, really.
But then, as we've seen in the last week or so, albeit one of the bids didn't actually make its way through, in terms of strikers, if you want a guarantee of a striker who's going to score your goals in the Championship, well, we came across one last weekend for Leeds, and Southampton tried to buy one from Sunderland this week, and they are pretty much 8-figure sums, aren't they? And there's no way in the world we're going to be paying 8-figure sums for a striker who you would hope is more of a guarantee to score you 15, 20 goals in the season. Norman's gone for a 3 out of 10, added to our squad, but not to our first team. David has gone for a 5 out of 10. Most disappointed that Ashton himself stated we could expect a few more additions that haven't materialised. Well, I suppose they have materialised, haven't they? Just to be fair, well, am I being fair to Ashton? He said there were 2 or 3 due to come in, and we have signed Williams and Scarlett since. But I suppose it's how you interpreted his rabble-rousing
2 to
speech.
3. It's now time to improve the starting 11 and 2 to 3 players. Well, I think he'd have to be a sort of very skilled politician to be able to claim that what he meant was that we'd be signing 2 to 3 players that would be on the bench effectively, or maybe Brandon Williams may come into the team at some point. But I don't expect Dane Scarlett to be starting the majority of games ahead of George Hurst over the rest of the season. And I don't know. Have we signed anyone this summer who's going to, other than George Hurst, who was here last year, and maybe Mas Luongo, who was here last year and contract expired? Have we signed anyone who you expect to start more than half the league games this summer? And I'd say no.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And also, if again, so it was that shoulder, wasn't it? The devil on this shoulder is just in my ear saying, well, and the people that you have signed has been potentially a Manchester United reserve in Tuanzebe. It's a Manchester United youth player in Williams. It's an Spurs youth player in Scarlett. You know, these are players that would have already been within Kieran McKenna's orbit, and potentially he's trained all 3 of those as well. Our scouting network's net isn't being cast too far afield, you could be argued. Although, and for balance, Chris has given the transfer window an 8 out of 10. He says we've retained all our key players. We secured the best manager in the country, new deals for Chaplin and Luongo, 2 long-term targets signed, added 3 high-quality loanees from Premiership clubs. So, there's ways and means of looking. I think it's just a question of whether you, as sort of Joe was alluding to there, it's an improvement on last year's team, isn't it? That some of the signings that Chris was referring to there were already our players in effect, and George Hurst was already playing for us, if not our player.
Yeah, I don't want to spend sort of the pod being sort of overly negative, overly critical, but if you look back through the comments that have been made through the summer, sort of from Kieran McKenna, from Mark Ashton, from Sam Morsey's when he spoke, it's all about, I can't remember who said exactly what, but it's what got us here won't take us there. We're not here to make up the numbers. Now's the time to improve the first 11. There's a lot of these comments, and ultimately, if you were to actually put those down on paper and compare the actions with the words, I don't think we've achieved what I'm not saying what the fans have been promised, but what the club was speaking about wanting to do. I don't think we've achieved that.
Yeah, and I suppose, Jacob, that there won't be many more people more frustrated than Mark Ashton, because, as David says here, we know that Ashton is keen on player trading. He's a real life football manager player, isn't he? It's what he did at Bristol City to varying degrees of success, depending on which club's forum you read. But it's something that I'm sure he would have wanted to do, but has been frustrated and restricted in being able to do so.
Yeah, and I think and as you mentioned, there are obviously mixed opinions on Ashton, but I think if you look at his previous track record, maybe the fees that have been spent, if you look at Bristol City, for example, the fees that were spent were quite high, but he was able to, on the flip side of that, he was able to bring in very big money for players. Like those, I think they got, when they sold Webster on after they bought him from us, I think they got about 20 million quid for him. And there were at least 3 or 4 players, sort of just off the top of my head, that I can think of that went for those sort of 8-figure fees as well. So yeah, he has been restricted, but I think as Joe mentioned, probably the biggest sin has possibly been what he said, rather than maybe building us up to expect more than maybe we should have done, or maybe we were right to expect that. But I think he fueled the fire a little bit and perhaps got a little bit overexcited, and that's probably why people are maybe not too happy with the business as a whole.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I don't think you can berate fans for having high expectations on the back of it. But by the same token, I think once the dust has settled, then you probably do need to look at it and think, well, it was just, as someone said here, I think Strange Martian, we want to consolidate after 4 years in League One, not go crazy. All of a sudden, expectations for the season had become unrealistic. But the club didn't really dampen those expectations down too much, did they, Joe?
No, and I don't really, for me, I don't really get the talk of consolidation, because ultimately 3 teams get relegated from the Championship. We're very, very unlikely to be in that 3 teams at the end of the season, as sort of by every measure you've seen. Like, you look at sort of your Sheffield Wednesdays, your Rotherhams, QPRs, teams like this, we're already miles ahead of those, sort of on and off the pitch. So the consolidation, what are we looking for? Trying to finish 15th and see where we go from there? Because I think to keep up with what McKenna can do, we need to be going with him, so to speak. I don't think we can just sort of plod along and we've got a 4 or 5 year plan to get out of this league, because you look what happens. Like Sunderland, they finished 6th last year, the first season up from League One, but their transfer window, it looks like at one point Ross Stewart was going to be going, Patrick Roberts was going to be going, Jack Clark was going to be going. All their loan players have gone back, and they're sort of a shell, and it's almost like they have to start again. I don't think there is a way that you can consolidate in this league. It's not really a league for consolidation. Coventry have an amazing season last year. They lose their 2 best players, and they've got to try and go again. It's a league where you just have to try and strike where the iron's hot. And I think with the squad and the form and the momentum we came up with last year, the iron is hot for us at the moment. I don't think you can just say, okay, well, we'll try and finish 12th here. We won't give it too much of a go, and then maybe next year we'll see where we are, because next year Leif Davis will probably be sold, and then you've got to try and find another left back to come in. We're not going to be good enough to have this rolling conveyor belt of players just coming one after the other.
That's a really good point, actually, Joe, about keeping up with McKenna. It's something that was briefly touched upon last year when there were potential concerns, and it wasn't guaranteed that we were actually going to go up. And that was the concern then, was that, you know, from what he's shown so far and how well he's progressed as a coach, and how well we've progressed as a team, if he doesn't quite make that final hurdle, will his expectations start going up, and we're hampering them because we're down in League One? Now it's a slightly different conversation in that we're in the Championship. But as you say, you know, can this squad that I'm now showing on the screen, is that giving him, in you 2 guys' opinion, is that giving him the tools that he needs to be able to, for us to be able to match what we believe to be his ambitions?
I don't think you can look at the squad and say that it's a top 6 squad. I think it probably is a mid-table squad. I don't know if you guys think that's fair. But as for McKenna as well, I think that with how highly rated he is, and again, this I don't think this is just, you know, obviously as Town fans, we think he's great, but just with his reputation in the game as well, I think that, tying into Joe's point about striking while the iron's hot, we do have to kind of keep up with his ambitions and his expectations. So, you know, if we are, say, you know, just outside the playoffs or something, playing nice football, we've seen clubs that have kind of come in for managers, even if they're not right at the top of the league. I think one example would be when Brighton came in and got Graham Potter from Swansea when they were playing, you know, they were in mid-table, but they were playing some quite nice football. And I think McKenna's, if you can have a club who's going to make an appointment like that, I don't think that would necessarily put other clubs off potentially interested in him. But I think we're hopefully a way away from that yet. But we do need to match his ambition, I think.
And when you look at, like, in the summer, there was talk, Leicester are in for McKenna or not. And we don't know if there was any truth. We don't know if there was any truth to those rumours, or or anything along those lines. But ultimately, Russell Martin finished nowhere with Swansea last year. Just played some nice football. He's now got the Southampton job. They've gone out and spent 8 million here, 8 million there, 10 million here, and they've got a squad which is just unbelievable, really, for the level we're at. And if we have a summer like this and a January like that, and McKenna can't get us anywhere near the playoffs, and he's looking at it again, and a team comes down and offers him that sort of opportunity, where I say you look at the 100-odd million that Southampton brought in transfers, Leicester bringing in sort of 45 million for Maddison, 45 million for Barnes, just gives a manager so much freedom, and that's what we've got to be careful about here.
Yeah. One little point that Howard's mentioned a little bit earlier, forgive me, Howard, I didn't notice it at the time, is that, and someone did mention when they were referencing and rating the transfer window, is we haven't lost any players, but we haven't heard that there's actually been much championship interest. I think, Joe, you'd heard whispers potentially about Davis and Wolverton. You can let us know about that now that the transfer window's shut. But it probably, out of all of our players, those two would probably be the obvious two that would get some sort of interest. But whether that's because, as we showed very early on in the show, the list of players that we've sold, that Plymouth have sold, that Sheffield Wednesday have sold, we haven't sold any. Is that because they're not quite nailed on to the fact that these are potentially going to be good players, or by virtue of them not having shown it, the fees that we were being provided with, the bids that we were receiving, weren't anything like we'd be looking at to let these guys go?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, really, because if a team, like I'm pretty sure a team did ask about Leif Davis, from what I heard, the answer was that it was a laughable amount that they were sort of considering for him, and it's because he's only done it in League One, and until he does it in the Championship, what are they talking about now? 4-5 million quid at the moment, where it's just not worth it for us to sell a player for that. We've got no cash sort of worries. It's not, cash flow is an issue in the business, so there isn't a need to sell a player for 4 to 5 million quid if you think they're going to be worth 15 million in a year's time, which is what you need to do, and that probably feeds in a little bit to why you need to get the loan players to increase the quality of the squad, because Leif Davis is only going to be worth 15 million if he gets 10-12 assists in the Championship this year and has a good season. And to get 10-12 assists, you need to get 65 points, 65 goals, and be an upper mid-table team. So you need to raise the level of the squad with your Dane Scarletts, your Amari Hutchinsons, and your Brandon Williamses, because you need that depth to try and do it. So you're a little bit caught between two stools. In order to play a trade, you need your players to be in a better position to showcase themselves more. So you're a little bit stuck. You couldn't just say, okay, well, Dane Scarlett isn't going to sign for us long term, even though we think he's better than Freddie Ladapo. We're not going to go for him because we're going to save the money, because you need him in there. We needed that extra striker in there. So it's I don't know. It's very difficult to balance it all out. But I think the squad is in decent shape. I just, like, for me, my main disappointments are, I feel we're in a really good position to have attacked the league a little bit more, and the noise from the club has built up that expectation as well with the fan base, including myself. And I don't think we've done enough to give us as good a chance as going for that top six, which is what I think we should be aiming for.
Jacob?
Yeah, Joe's basically, the point he's made is similar to what I was going to say, really. I just don't think that the risk reward for selling Davis would have been in our favour at this point, because what are you going to get? I mean, like I said, 3-4? I don't know, something like that. Just plucking a figure out of the air. We're not going to sell for that. Clubs aren't going to go significantly higher until he's done it in the Championship. If he can get double figure assists, then his value will really go up. And left back, again, is one of those positions where there aren't that many players available. So he's potentially, the scarcity there might really drive the price up. And I think that we're much better off just waiting and potentially getting a big fee there, and then that's how our player trading would start the ball rolling, and we could end up like some of these clubs that we've seen this summer. Yeah,
on that first slide with a chunk of change in our pocket to go and do some Mark Ashton player trading. Quick question here from Strange Martian. would this team beat the playoff team that lost to Norwich? What do you think, Joe? It's full of a few gnarled old championship players in that playoff team, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think maybe some of our fans might underestimate how good that team was now because of the latter years of it. But ultimately, this team needs to show that they can do it in a championship like that team did. I think that team finished in top half 4 years out of 5. At the moment, people are saying they're happy to consolidate. At the moment, well, that team was doing more than that. Was a consolidated championship team, which some people see as an ambition for this team. So I think that might need to be remembered. And also, while there was a lot of criticism of the transfer business done back then, I think maybe there's been a little wake-up call with regards to how difficult the transfer market is in this league when you've got teams in there with an income of 100 million and teams in the league, including ourselves, in that sort of income of sort of 16, 17 million to try and compete with those. And then maybe there might be a rejudgment of that team at some point.
Yeah. Just a quick couple here. Again, Strange Martian saying, last time I looked, we were 6th, and a win tomorrow, probably top 4. Jules is along similar lines. We're 4 games in. We've won 3 out of 4 and only lost to a team with 80 million quid of forwards. I believe we have a lot better side than what we realise. My slight caveat to that would be that the games that we've won, we've had pretty much the same team out for those. We haven't had to rely on the names on the screen that are further down the list than the top name on the screen in each position, if you see what I mean. We haven't had to worry too much about our squad depth as yet. And the one game that we did lose was the one game that George Hurst wasn't necessarily available for. How do you see it, Jacob, in terms of the start that we've had? And understandably, it's fair play. Jules is saying that we've won 3 out of first 4. There's maybe not such a time to panic, but the games are going to start to come a bit thick and fast, aren't they? Once we hit the post-international break.
I've been quite pleasantly surprised with the start, really. Even taking the defeat into account, I thought we're probably maybe 2 or 3 points up on where I thought we would be. I think what's been most encouraging is that we've won games in different ways. So, I mean, this is following on from what we did at the end of last season, where McKenna kind of changed the style up a little bit at times, like kind of keep the principles the same, but maybe willing to add a bit of variation in those tougher games. Like we saw how we won at Sunderland. Like, I thought we deserved to win that game. I know if you look at the stats, it probably wouldn't look like it if you hadn't watched the game, but for all the possession that they had, I think we restricted them pretty well. And we looked really, really good on the counter attack. I know none of the goals really came from those kind of situations, but we looked really good there. I thought Stoke, we controlled the game, easily deserved to win that. QPR, I think that was more of a kind of throwback to some of those games that we maybe had in January, February, where it was a team that was kind of behind the ball, well organised. It was on us to break them down, and we didn't play very well, but we did ultimately get the job done. I think it's been a relatively positive start so far, and I just think the way that we've managed to find different ways to win games is probably the most promising thing, even just as promising as the results that we've had.
Yeah, quite starkly different to the way that we were having to play and were playing towards the tail end of last season. It's certainly in terms of possession, and next year, as you say, we're pretty much a middling. We look at the various graphs and scatter graphs that are out there at the moment. We are in the big clump of teams in the middle at the moment. Just one final one here from Romeo as we start to wrap up, and it sort of refers to what you were saying earlier, Joe, about the politicians' answer to what are you would suspect to be some questions over the weekend. He says that Ashton probably needs to come out and set out the reasons for not fulfilling his intentions. And he thinks, well, crikey, he thinks most Town fans will understand. I can't imagine most Town fans on Twitter will understand, Romeo, but yeah, you may be right that most Town fans will understand.
I do think most fans are pretty willing to forgive a lot from the club at the moment, to be fair. And I'm not saying what they've done needs forgiveness, but I mean, when there's things come up, it's so, like, for example, the membership scheme, which, I say, it's all of a sudden we're going to start charging me £40 for the privilege of going to the away game. There hasn't been any communication from the club about it, but people just seem to get over it. So I do think that if there probably should be on Town TV a chat about it, what happened in the window, where it went well, where it where it didn't go well. I'm not saying they need to sit down and break down every target, but I think Kieran McKenna is excellent at giving the fans incredible amounts of information about what he's doing tactically, what he's doing on the pitch, what sort of effectively why he's doing what he's doing. And maybe if we get some of that from the back end of the club, that would be good.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it would benefit Ashton as well, wouldn't it? Like, because this is a window which I think, some people think it's all right, some people not so happy. I think mixed would probably be a fair description to use. I think if something like that were to happen, and it kind of reduces the pressure going into the next window. Like if we don't get what we want in January, and I think we haven't really touched on it yet, but with we discussed it in the Telegram group, we've obviously got the Asian and the African tournaments coming up in January, so we're going to potentially have some more. We've got more just to address a current squad that we've got in January. So I think that will be quite a busy window. So if we've got something where there's a lot of goodwill still going into that, I think that would benefit Ashton going into that window.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Well, there'll no doubt be some PR coming out of PR over the course of the weekend. Just a few plugs here before we wrap up. As ever, Rich and Seb's excellent pre-match pod is out and ready for your consumption, either tonight as you wind down to the transfer window slamming shut, or tomorrow as you wind your way to the game. Just please remember, as I said at the very beginning, they got quite libelous at certain points during the pod, and if you just ignore those, that'd be fantastic. Flagship on Sunday, I believe, is yourself, Joe, with Ben and Dave.
Looking forward to it. Hopefully to discuss some debut goals for Dane Scarlett and another win.
Yeah, and that will be live as ever at 8 p.m. Blue Monday, ITFC.co.uk for all your Blue Monday needs and requirements. Links to everything you'd need on there. Please give us a thumbs up if you would. I believe it helps in some shape, way or another. And subscribe, obviously, if you aren't already. So yeah, what I shall now do, sadly, I shall mothball the ceremonial mothballing of the ticker until January the 1st, where I believe Rich has agreed that every pod throughout January will have the rolling yellow transfer ticker on it. So look out for that. Thanks for everyone in your comments. Thanks very much for joining us. Sorry we couldn't bring you any earth-shattering breaking news in terms of transfers, bits of that. But hopefully the guys have had a decent discussion about what has happened, what hasn't happened, what maybe should have happened. Thank you to Joe, and I hope everyone will join me in thanking and congratulating Jacob on his debut, which has been a fantastic debut from him. And we hope to see more of you, Jacob. If not at the matches themselves, due to you being so far away, but hopefully we'll see more of you on screen.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining us. And as Joe said, hopefully we'll be celebrating an Ipswich win come Sunday night's Flagship.